The sun was cruel that morning, hanging low over the Texas horizon like it had come to witness a mistake. Dust curled across the wooden steps of St. Mary's Chapel, the kind of dust that came from miles of empty land and broken promises. Horses stamped restlessly in the heat, leather saddles creaking, church bells silent. Inside, Ethan Cole stood alone at the altar, boots polished, hat in his hands shaking. He wasn't a man who shook. Ethan Cole had survived gunfights, cattle stampedes, winters that froze rivers solid. He had buried his father, buried friends, buried dreams. But today, standing in a borrowed black suit that didn't quite fit his broad shoulders, he felt something worse than fear. Hope. And hope was dangerous. Every pew behind him was filled. Ranch hands whispered. Ladies fanned themselves. Old men watched with knowing eyes. They'd seen this before: weddings, funerals, heartbreaks. But never like this. Because the bride was late. 30 minutes late. An hour late. And Ethan still stood there. He remembered the first time he'd seen Clara Bennett. She'd been standing on a broken fence outside her father's ranch, sleeves rolled up, hair wild in the wind, arguing with 3 hired men twice her size. She wasn't loud. She wasn't rude. She was right. And Ethan had fallen in love before he even knew her name. She had changed him in ways no bullet ever could. Made him laugh. Made him dream. Made him believe a cowboy could be more than dust and loneliness. She had said yes. So he stood there. Because Ethan Cole was not a man who left. Whispers grew louder. She ain't comin'. Poor fool. City girl never stays. The pastor cleared his throat gently. Son, maybe we should. Ethan shook his head. She'll come. But his voice cracked. And somewhere far outside, thunder rolled across a sky with no clouds. 3 miles away, Clara Bennett was running. Barefoot, dress torn, heart racing like a horse at full gallop. Her father's men were behind her. She could hear them shouting, hear the crack of branches, hear the anger in their voices. Because Clara Bennett was not supposed to marry a cowboy. She was supposed to marry money. Her father, William Bennett, owned half the land from here to the Rio Grande. He didn't believe in love. He believed in deals. And Ethan Cole, with his stubborn pride and empty pockets, was a bad investment. So the night before the wedding, her father locked her in her room. Told her Ethan would leave like all poor men did. Told her she'd thank him later. But Clara Bennett wasn't her father's daughter that morning. She climbed out the window in her wedding dress. She ran, through cactus fields, through mud, through fear, because Ethan Cole had once told her something under a sky full of stars. I ain't got riches, Clara. Ain't got fine houses. But I got a heart that don't quit. And she believed him. She believed him when he taught her to ride. When he sat beside her mother's grave in silence. When he gave her his mother's ring, hands trembling worse than today. She believed him when he said, I'll wait for you. So she ran faster. Her father's men caught up near the old river bend. They grabbed her arm, tore her veil. Miss Bennett, you're comin' home. She slapped one of them so hard his hat flew into the water. You tell my father, she said, voice shaking but fierce, that I choose my own life. Then she ran again. Toward the chapel. Toward Ethan. Toward forever. Inside the chapel, silence had become heavy. The guests were standing now, murmurs turning into pity. The pastor placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. Son, sometimes love don't come back. Ethan closed his eyes. Every memory hit him at once. Her laugh, her stubborn chin, the way she'd fall asleep on his shoulder after long rides. He swallowed hard. If she don't come, he whispered, I'll still thank God I knew her. Then, the doors slammed open. Wind rushed inside. Dust swirled like a storm. And there she was, Clara Bennett. Hair tangled, dress torn, barefoot and breathless. Eyes shining like sunrise after the longest night. The whole church gasped. Ethan didn't move. He couldn't, because he thought he was dreaming. Clara walked down the aisle slowly, every step shaking. Tears streaked her face, blood dotted her feet. But she smiled. I'm late, she said softly. Ethan's voice broke. You came. She reached him, took his trembling hands. I had to fight half of Texas, she whispered, but I'm here. The pastor wiped his eyes. The guests stood silent, and Ethan Cole, cowboy fighter, stubborn fool, fell to his knees and cried like a man who had been saved. That day, under cracked wooden beams and a sky finally raining, they said their vows, but none of them knew that the hardest part of their love story hadn't even begun. Because outside, Clara's father was riding toward the chapel with 10 armed men, and Ethan Cole was about to lose everything he had just gained. The rain started as a whisper against the chapel roof, tapping soft like hesitant applause for a love that had finally won. Inside, laughter mixed with tears. Old ranch hands slapped Ethan's back. Women hugged Clara until her torn veil slipped loose. Someone struck a fiddle. Someone uncorked whiskey meant for celebrations that rarely came in dusty towns like this. For a moment, it felt like the world had decided to be kind. Then the horses came. Hoofbeats thundered like war drums across the soaked earth. The sound rolled closer, louder, angry. Every cowboy in the room froze. Every man who'd lived long enough to know trouble felt it before they saw it. Ethan turned toward the doors slowly. He knew that rhythm. He knew those horses. He knew that storm. The chapel doors burst open again, not with hope this time, but with power. William Bennett rode in like a king who had come to claim stolen property. His black coat was soaked from the rain, silver buttons glinting, his hat shadowed eyes that had never forgiven the world for not obeying him. 10 armed riders stood behind him, shotguns, revolvers, faces like stone. The fiddle stopped mid-note. The laughter died, and Clara's fingers tightened around Ethan's hand. "Papa," she said softly. William Bennett dismounted without breaking eye contact with Ethan. Boots hit the wooden floor like hammer blows. He looked around the chapel slowly, disgust curling his lip. "A wedding," he said coldly, "without my blessing." No one answered, because everyone knew the Bennetts, and no one wanted to be buried before sunset. William stepped closer to Clara. Rain dripped from his coat onto the white floorboards. "You're coming home." Clara lifted her chin. "I am home." Silence exploded between them. William's eyes moved to Ethan.
"You," he said, "you think you can steal my daughter? My name, my land?"
Ethan didn't reach for his gun, didn't move, just said quietly, "I didn't steal nothing. She chose." William laughed once, sharp as broken glass. Poor men always talk about choice. Rich men talk about consequences. Behind him, one of the riders cocked a shotgun. The pastor whispered a prayer. Clara stepped forward, standing between Ethan and her father. "If you hurt him," she said, voice shaking but fierce, "you lose me forever." William's face didn't change, but his hand moved toward his revolver. And Ethan Cole knew the night had just turned into something no prayer could stop. The first gunshot didn't come from Ethan. It came from outside. A window shattered. Glass rained across the pews. Someone screamed. Chaos exploded. Men dove for cover. Benches flipped. Smoke filled the air. William's riders spread out like wolves. And Ethan Cole finally moved. Not toward his gun, toward Clara. He pushed her behind the altar, shielding her with his body as bullets punched through wood. His heart hammered like a runaway train, but his mind was calm, because Ethan Cole had been here before. Years ago, before Clara, before hope, before love softened his edges. He had been part of a gang that robbed trains under moonlight, led by a man named Caleb Vance, a man who believed loyalty meant blood. A man Ethan had betrayed when he chose a different life. And now, as smoke filled the chapel, a voice called from the doorway. Well, if it ain't the traitor Cowboy." Ethan froze. Because he knew that voice. Caleb Vance stepped into the church, smiling like a snake warmed by fire. His coat was long, his revolver shining, his eyes bright with revenge. "You ran off with my money," Caleb said softly. "Thought you could play rancher, husband, good man." Ethan clenched his fists. "I left that life." Caleb shrugged. "Life didn't leave you." William Bennett glanced at Caleb.
"You know this man?" Caleb grinned. "Know him. I made him." Gasps filled the chapel.
Clara stared at Ethan like she didn't recognize him. And Ethan's worst fear came true, not death, but seeing doubt in her eyes. Caleb continued, voice smooth as poison. "Your husband robbed trains, shot men, left friends to hang, and now he wants to marry into your family." William's rage turned to something colder. Betrayal. He drew his revolver. "So you're a thief," William said to Ethan. Ethan nodded slowly. Clara whispered, "Ethan, is it true?" He met her eyes, heartbreaking. Every word. "But I left it for you." The silence was louder than gunfire. Then William raised his gun, and Clara stepped in front of Ethan again. "You shoot him," she said. "You shoot me too." Her father's hand trembled, and in that trembling moment, everything changed. Rain roared outside. Lightning cracked across the sky. Inside, 3 men stood at the edge of destiny. William Bennett, powerful, proud, terrified of losing control. Caleb Vance, hungry for revenge, smiling like death. Ethan Cole, cowboy with blood on his past and hope in his heart. Caleb fired first. The bullet struck William's shoulder. He spun, crashing into a pew. His men shouted. Guns roared. Smoke swallowed the chapel. Ethan grabbed Clara and pulled her down as splinters flew. He knew Caleb's style, chaos first, mercy never. Ethan drew his revolver, but he didn't shoot. He ran toward William instead. Because Clara screamed, "Help him!" Ethan pressed cloth to William's wound, ignoring the guns around him. William stared up at him, shocked. "Why help me?" Ethan's voice broke. "Because you're her father." Something cracked inside the old man. Years of pride, years of fear, years of believing money could buy loyalty. And he saw the truth. This cowboy loved his daughter more than life. Caleb laughed. "Still the hero, Ethan. You ain't changed. That's your problem." He raised his gun at Clara. Time slowed. Ethan moved. The bullet meant for Clara hit Ethan's chest. The sound was small. The silence after was endless. Clara screamed his name. Ethan fell into her arms, blood warm against her torn dress. His breath came shallow, ice fading. "I waited at the altar," he whispered. "Worth it." Clara shook her head wildly. "No, no. You promised forever." Ethan smiled weakly. "Forever starts somewhere." William Bennett grabbed a fallen shotgun and fired. Caleb Vance dropped, dead before he hit the floor. The rain softened. The gun stopped. And in the quiet, Clara held Ethan as if love alone could keep his heart beating. "Don't leave me," she begged. Ethan looked at her like she was sunrise itself. "You walked in," he whispered. "Changed my life forever." Then his eyes closed. But his hand didn't fall, because Clara held it, and William Bennett, kneeling beside them, finally broke into tears. That night, the richest man in Texas learned the value of a poor cowboy's love. That night, Clara Bennett lost fear and found strength. And that night, Ethan Cole didn't die, because sometimes love fights harder than bullets. Weeks later, he woke to Clara's voice reading beside his bed, to William Bennett promising land, forgiveness, and a future. And Ethan Cole, the cowboy who waited alone at the altar, became something more. A husband, a father, a legend whispered in dusty towns where people said, love came late that day, but it came strong enough to change 3 lives forever.